Here she is. Hello.
Hi.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're good. We're good.
We good.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I know
Yes,
you
thank you for
are.
having me.
Oh yeah, of course. You're in between classes, or maybe you just ended one of your classes. But
Yeah, I ended my classes for the day, which is
okay,
You
good.
did.
Good.
Per-
Good.
Perfect. Perfect.
I wanted to talk about your upbringing, about the way you grew up, and how did Alexa come
Yeah.
to be who she is today?
Yeah, I am very grateful to say that I believe that I had a pretty amazing upbringing. I had a very loving and supporting family that encouraged me to do kind of or pursue any endeavor that I
Yes.
wanted to. And so about seventh or eighth grade, it's kind of funny. I did a project where in my home and careers class where you had to learn how to budget your yearly salary.
Oh, wow.
And so they said choose any profession you want to do.
Yes.
And I knew that lawyers tended to make a little more money, so I chose that profession
Yes.
so that I would have more money to
Money.
budget with.
Right.
Yes.
But after learning more about the occupation and about the realm of politics,
Yes.
that's what really drew my or really sparked an interest and drew my attention. So throughout high school, I did extracurriculars that would sort of help me in the policy realm.
Yes.
And now I am at Cornell University where I am studying policy analysis and management.
Ooh.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. How is that going?
I really, really find it interesting because kind of going back to my upbringing, I was raised in a predominantly white Republican area of New York.
Yes.
So getting exposure to different cultures and a little bit more diversity and a wider range of political views, I'm able to digest more and think more of think of more externalities to current current issues and just multiple perspectives and how it could affect
Yes.
a lot of people in ways that I had never known.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So-
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's important. I mean, would you say that happened in college, like
The first
the
year.
first year or so, or was that sort of
That's when I got a lot of exposure to different,
Yes.
to multiple perspectives and opinions.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How was it for you? How it's when you were exposed to new things and knowing that that's your life is going to be in that direction where you're going to be exposed with different cultures, different communities, and different, all those different perspectives, and you're going to find yourself in those say realms. Is that
Yeah.
how you
Yeah.
you say
Yeah.
it? Yeah. How were you scared?
I actually was not that scared because I'd always known that where I kind of grew up was a little bit of a bubble. So I would kind of turn to the internet to try to find those
Mm-hmm.
different ways of looking at life.
Yeah.
However, when I came here is when I actually met people who had those perspectives.
Mm.
So it wasn't really scary to me.
Yeah.
It was just more of evidence that those people that I kind of turned to online to gather different mindsets and ways of thinking existed, if that makes sense.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That does make a lot of sense.
Yes, it does.
So, okay, it's always a mouthful for me. Your major policy analysis and management.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, for people who don't understand exactly what that is, what does that tackle? Because we've had a lot of interesting conversations about it,
Mhm.
but could you explain, briefly, what you are going to be engaging in and what you have been engaged with?
Yes. So the easiest way I can put it, it's a combination of poli-sci and economics.
Mhm.
So that's probably the easiest way I can say that. And basically, a lot of it, what it is not just learning about the current government that we have going on in America, but also doing a little bit of comparisons between our government and other countries' government establishments and how kind kind of what works for them and how we might be able to incorporate that in America.
Yes.
Would it be able to work with the current population that we have, since ours tends to be a little larger than other countries that we might look at?
Yes.
More so, if I do introduce a policy, how effective would it be, and would it only benefit maybe one race or one type of community or maybe one income level? And just looking at not just the policy itself and how it looks on paper, but really diving into it and kind of exploring ways that it could potentially have negative externalities or even positive externalities, looking into how it may disproportionately affect one community. Would it benefit marginalized communities? It's just basically taking everything and ripping it apart and looking really deep into it, making sure that the policy proposed is probably the most beneficial, effective, and efficient policy. Hence policy analysis.
As now you're saying it, I remember in our previous conversations, you mentioned something about how there are programs and or scholarships that are available for low-income communities, but the way the policies are put in place, it's very complicated for families to know that they're actually available for them. And I remember you, can you talk a little bit about that and how you, when you were not amazed, like shocked to find out all those things?
So kind of like back before I came to Cornell, when I was just kind of looking for those different perspectives online, I couldn't really grasp like everything about them. So like, again, little hard with like kind of the bubble that I was growing up in. But I would always look at policies and people are talking about systematic racism and everything kind of occurring in today's society. And I would always like try to look for the policies that were quote unquote like racist. And I would try to find like the verbiage in these policies that were explicitly racist, and I'd be like, I couldn't necessarily find them. But then after coming to Cornell is when I saw how it doesn't really have to be explicitly racist to hurt marginalized communities, if that makes sense.
Yes, it doesn't have to be direct, like
exactly, like there's indirect relations and connections. So kind of what you had brought up with the scholarships, I was just kind of thinking after a conversation I had with someone where there is in New York, if I can't remember the threshold exactly, but it's about if you make less than, I believe, $100,000, or at least that was what it was when it was proposed, then you could go to a SUNY school or State University of New York, that's abbreviated SUNY, for free.
For free.
Yeah.
If you make less than $100,000.
I believe that was the threshold when it was proposed. I don't know the current threshold though.
Yes.
But I guess like that on paper sounds amazing, and it was supposed to help those low income families and like neighborhoods.
Yes.
However, while that is amazing, there aren't as many measures put in place to help those lower income families and neighborhoods get to the point where they're graduating and going through the college search process. So while there is that program out there to help lower income families with college, there's not necessarily the tools and resources to get them to that point. So while it's like helping quite a few families, it's not helping as many as there could be if there were the necessary resources to get them to that point.
So there is like a very critical like bridge that is there to like bridge that particular gap.
Because also in New York, public high schools get funding based on their performance level. So the highest performing high schools get more money granted to them.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
So that kind of goes against the whole
You are, yeah.
Like
So
it's
how
kind
are you ever going to
conflicting.
perform well if you have no funding at all? Like,
Yeah, so that policy hurts lower income families, and it doesn't help them get to the point where they are graduating at a rate as which higher income areas are,
yeah,
and that kind of counter
yeah.
there's the whole SUNY school
Yes.
scholarship.
Oh, that's awful because that's like teasing you. It's like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
if you climb these mountains, there, I don't know, when you get to the top, we're going to give you this whatever. It's like I don't, it's like
Yeah.
a tease.
And it's
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
well, and it also kind of presents like proof for like, okay, well, look, we have these systems in place.
Yeah.
You can't complain to us that, people don't have these particular opportunities,
Yes.
but, again, these things, these tools are not available.
Yeah.
And it's kind of harder, maybe a little bit more subtle to pinpoint and then
Yes.
see that is the particular reason versus, versus otherwise.
Yeah.
But I'm curious because you said a moment ago, in these discussions in class, you all are sort of tearing up. I think that's what the word you use is, like tearing up policy, kind of breaking it down. What are these conversations like with? I was gonna say other young people. We're all young, but you're a little bit younger than we are.
Yes. Much younger.
What are these conversations like among young people? I mean, are they receptive to it? Is it a kind of a challenge?
Yeah. I think something that, at least from my peers at my university, that I found when working on these projects, when we have to actually like break down policy, is we all, regardless of our political affiliation, try to look at it as neutral as possible, which I think contrasts the current system that we have going on with our government being very polarized.
Yes.
We try to mostly look at it as, okay, how can this help or so inequality without our own biases. Like
kind of like getting.
I think I'm wording this wrong, but we try to ignore our biases and biases when looking at these policies, and then focus on inequality and how that could help, and then look at efficiency and how much it could benefit a community or how successful it could be. And I really like that we try to go at it as moderate or as neutral as possible, because we're not trying to just push on something that helps our personal agenda. Rather, we're trying to look at society as a whole and what could most benefit that, but also considering the communities that might need it most.
See, and that's important that you bring that up. I've been reading a couple books, and I just, in the conversations we have, just normal discourse in life, it has occurred to me that we like to have like sort of like a blanket general like a band-aid to sort of fix everything across the board, as if people in what we consider low income neighborhood or communities have the same sort of issues that people in more affluent neighborhoods. We're in Los Angeles. It's very like night and day a lot of times. But the one band-aid won't fix another person's or group's issue, right? And so it sounds like you're having very specific conversations and are considering the specific issues that this community has versus another. So it is more tailor-made to be like, we recognize the particular issues that we have. We recognize the systemic racism, the certain issues that have been in place that will hurt marginalized people, that will benefit other people. So those are really challenging conversations to have. And it is a far cry from some of these things that were maybe taught 20 years ago when I was, I'm not in college 20 years ago, but I just remember those conversations and in school. And just the progression, it seems, that we've had, at least in classrooms. So it's very encouraging is what I'm trying to say. But again, I mean, it cannot be easy. And I feel like maybe sometimes you're just kind of like running around in circles, like, well, how do we fix this? You know,
I know.
as young people.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking, as you guys young, because the world is for you guys, for young people, and the future is for you guys to, you know, and just when you're looking at where life is right now, and you are now studying to make this world a better place, do you have hope that when, you know, when from your peer, when you talk to your peers, when you look at all the events that are occurring on the planet right now, do you have hope?
I do have hope in like kind of my my age group, if you're considering like me young, like in my like kind of the kids that are in college right now.
Yes, yes.
I have a lot of hope in that generation. Like for example, I was in a government 101 class my freshman year. So at my university, we have a lot of core requirements that we have to take regardless of your major. So that involved students of many majors, many backgrounds, and they brought in a guest speaker, which happened to be a former New York House of Representative congressman. And he sent out a poll which kind of asked us about our political affiliation to further make a point in his lecture. And it was very much down the middle, like very much a moderate view, which I think is very, even though a lot of people would look at Cornell as being very liberal. The specific question he asked, it wasn't really like, are you a Democrat or Republican? It was, put yourself on a spectrum. And it was not very much like extreme right or extreme left.
No, it's like somewhere.
It leaned a little more liberal, but still relatively moderate, if that makes sense.
Yes, that makes sense.
And so I think that's important, especially when looking at the future of our country. Having that mind, like removing our biases and progressing forward. Kind of going back to what I said, like we have a project that I'm doing right now where we're looking at policy maps. And if we remove our biases, regardless of what political affiliation we are, we just kind of let the data speak for itself. So we can kind of put a whole bunch of filters in this policy website that we're using in the maps, and we can put, you know, racial demographics, and then it'll show up on the map and like give you kind of a legend that said, okay, if this color means predominantly white, this color means predominantly POC, and it gives percentages too. And there's like a spectrum of colors that you can look at. But then you change the filter and say, okay, now let's look at median family income. It's very reflective that more POC dominated communities have a lesser family, like median family income than those that are predominantly white. So we kind of just let the data speak for itself. And I think that's something that, at least from the people that I met here, a lot of people like to look at, is letting the data and those policy maps and everything speak for themselves. So like, so I guess that's something that gives me hope. But I also, like, in terms of change, like, we still definitely need to push for our current government to make changes that we can then continue, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm maybe to piggyback off of that, and this I guess is kind of a broader question, but how or have you considered in the discussions things on a more global scale, like maybe the global effects, the global ripples of breaking down these policies? Like, how does that affect people on the other side of the planet? And like more individually, have you considered anything like that, or have these discussions sort of ventured in that direction?
I will be honest and say that most of our conversations have been predominantly
US
domestic focused.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which now that I am a junior, we're starting to venture out into comparing more globally, like how the US policies then could affect other countries.
Yeah.
I mean, which there definitely are. The biggest one I can think of is in more of a business aspect.
Right.
I was thinking about
the ability. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Women, I was thinking about women, even women evolution. I would say how it affects the U.S. Women. I would say women more freedom from women. How that freedom really affects other communities all around the world in the ways that, oh, okay, so we can get paid the same, or we can have this higher education. We can be more than just produce children. So there was I think that's where when as you were saying that about US policies, how it affects other communities, it does affect it in both ways, negatively or positively. So I was that's where my mind went right away.
And that's very relevant, especially with what's going on in Iran. I think technology has very much evolved to a point where a lot of countries are seeing the progressions that we have made in America. So then try to push for those changes to then continue in their own country. But in terms of like actual policies, I don't think I have like the enough education to give an opinion
to
on
be
that.
able to change, to make like policy changes in the It's heartbreaking. I've been seeing it a lot in the news, and I mean we've our women all over the world are kind of marginalized. Not kind of, they are marginalized, and you don't sometimes realize how marginalized you are until you're at a place where you see other women and you're like, oh, you can do that. And so that sometimes it's that inspiration to help other countries. Usually it's not even US making those policies, is the people in those countries learning from, learning new information, maybe US being an example, and then applying the same, ways of life in their, livelihood, I would say. But those policies here in the US, I find them to make huge difference. Like if you say the voting rights, if you say all these historically things that change the first in policies, yes, sometimes takes people to change it, to kind of take out their biases, and the way exactly what you're talking about, we can see them on the monitors and see how those things can actually change people's lives, but it takes a long time for us as humans to kind of embrace those new changes, because not having a bias, it's a huge change in people's minds and hearts. So I don't know, I was going with that.
No, well, I mean, it's kind of going back to like the whole gist of our conversation being community.
Yes.
Community can be defined in so many ways. It could be like religious community, it could be your community that you find at your school, it could be your neighborhood, it could be your state.
Yes.
But if we like defined US as a community, that's just how one community is impacting like a bunch.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And even learning from one another. I remember the other day we talked about when you were in a psychology class, what you learned about the Native Americans, and how when one community doesn't know anything about the other community, you can easily hurt one another. You can hurt each other because we are, when that one backs and we don't know anything about the other community. And but there was something you shared that was really important that I thought it's really it's I don't know what word I can use. It's it's a great perspective when we get to learn about the other community, not just assume or yes, not assume or yeah. There's a story you shared about the doctors, how they assumed that the Native Americans couldn't feel pain.
Oh yes, that.
Yeah,
I was trying to remember what I had told
you.
you.
I saw that. Yes, he was that. Yeah,
so in
a
fundamental,
that?
yeah, in a fundamental of population health class that I'm taking,
Yes.
we saw an example from a textbook in 2017, I believe, that was shown in during med school, I believe.
Yeah.
And on that page, it was trying to explain to doctors and nurses different ways certain cultures may deal with pain. And so they said, like, okay, so this culture may take pain on more easily because they have learned that pain really, like, pain is good for them or something like that. Like, very stereotypical
horrible
assumptions on how different people will deal with pain.
Yes.
But, and while that was just supposed to, like, it may have been innocent. I have no idea what was going on in like the author's mind. But even if it was supposed to be really innocent and say, okay, like, just trying to expose you on how cultures traditionally deal with pain, doctors or potential doctors and nurses and hospital staff could read that and then say, okay, so because this culture supposedly deals with pain this way, I don't have to give them as much pain medicine.
Right.
Or I don't have to, they may be just like whiny, so I'll just ignore them when they're telling me how much pain they're in.
Yes.
Which is kind of wrong. That's wrong. You have to.
Well, I mean, it was taken as fact, though, right? Like these stereotypes or these things that we assumed, because we all have biases. Bias is not inherently bad. That's not the thing. We all have prejudices. We all have biases. But the work is when you take the time and you take the effort to learn about things or people that you don't understand. But it's dangerous when you just run with things that aren't substantiated in fact and stuff of that nature. So,
especially you can easily dehumanize the other when you're stereotypically classifying them and dividing them into groups and assuming how it's almost like they're not human anymore. They're subject, and that's what we saw in Holocaust. That's what we saw in all the wars and divisions that happened in the world. A lot of the times were those, classifications of how how could they deal with pain or what they need to be able to survive. But it starts slowly like that. You read a book and you're like, oh, okay, they don't feel pain. I should just go kind of, do whatever.
Yeah. And I even, in the class after my professor had presented that slide, someone who was Asian rose their hand and wanted to give their opinion on it. And I thought it was very important to hear, because he did say, I'm going to be honest, like a lot of those stereotypes that they talked about under the Asian subcategory, that's how like I was raised. With those stereotypes.
Yes.
But we have to remember that it doesn't apply to every Asian American that's going to step through the hospital doors. And also the fact that there wasn't a disclaimer saying, like, even if this is what you see, treat them all the same. Like, there was nothing that kind of stated that. So he was kind of pointing out the faults in this article, whether the intention was good or bad. And so that's also something that really resonated with me with what he said. Like, even though it is, for him, it happened to be true, doesn't mean that you should generalize.
Yeah, and even as you're saying that, like cultures learn. I feel like humans there's a friend of ours we were talking about earlier, cultures, in the different cultures, they learn how to survive. Life is about survival and thriving. And so depending on your circumstances and your surroundings, you learn how to operate. And so, or environment. And so even if I've learned to internalize pain, it's because that's the option. That's the only option I have. And so I haven't learned to actually not internalize it. Exactly. So someone who actually knows that pain doesn't have to be internalized. If I was the other person who know, like for example, if let's say Alex, I met Alex and then I said, you know, I know that in your culture you guys don't cry and you don't express yourselves, and so what I'm going to do is just keep hurting that person because they're not gonna say anything.
Yeah, it's not a big deal.
But in my culture, I know that it may hurt them. So I think it becomes wrong when you doing it on purpose, or you're not trying to do it just because you know they're not going to be reactive to it. Yeah. But in reality, you know that it's gonna hurt them. Even if they're not going to respond that same way. And so it might be those cultures that are quiet, or they don't, scream when they have pain, or they scream too much when they have pain. It's just how do we meet them, not stereotypically, like you mentioned. Yeah. It's a great lesson, I think, to learn. As you were saying it really made me think about how we treat each other.
Yeah. And to piggyback off of that, like it's one thing to sort of conceptualize it, because we've been having conversations for the longest time, just trying to sort of understand, okay, well, we're told it's good to have conversations, we're told it's good to try our best to understand it, but once it's actually put into practice and put into action, a lot of times you realize, like, what you read out of a book or what you're told doesn't necessarily translate one-to-one.
No.
And it's almost like a case-by-case basis. How do you actually do this stuff? So we talked a little bit about individualism versus community in terms of like how you lived your life and how you what you put your energies into. And again, like the dean said, we were having this conversation with our friend, people intrinsically, like one thing that we as humans know how to do, and well, like as a baseline, it's just how we survive. Like that is our number one goal. Is just to learn how to survive, eat, drink, try to find shelter, and then it's like, I think there's like the hierarchy of needs, right? I forget whose it is, but you need community, right? That's another major need. We're social creatures. You need to be able to exist in something that supports you and the sort of idealism that you carry. But on the flip side, we also need to be able to survive, which is a very singular thing. Surviving doesn't, like, as a baseline, does not include anybody else. They survived, you survived. Very singular. And so how do we move, in your opinion, how do we move forward from that? Yes, we need to survive, but how do we move past the consumption to make sure that I'm okay all the time? Because there's you go past the point of the point of diminishing returns, right? Where you blow past, like, okay, I don't need to do this much stuff for myself. Let me think about my community. Let me think about the people who could benefit from my upbringing or my help and my energies again. So, I mean, what do you think about that? And, like, I know it's broad, but it is something that we are trying to be more mindful of. So, yeah, I mean, what do you think about that whole thing?
That's actually very interesting. I had never thought about that before, but just kind of off of a whim, looking back to how I kind of like what extracurriculars I would involve myself in high school, and also just me as an academic student. I think when I was at school, school is very much on an individual basis.
Right.
So when I was at school, 100% of my time was in working on improving anything that I could about my academic self.
Yeah. Right.
However, when I was outside of school, even though I was very much focused on what backtracking a little bit for especially some of the more competitive colleges that I was looking at, you need to have a very nice resume, very nice list of extracurriculars. So, and obviously succeed well in school.
Yes.
So I dedicated my time or 100% into schooling when I was there. But then after school, when I did need to build that resume of extracurriculars, I would think about, okay, yes, I'm doing this for myself so I can build that resume, but also let me do some extracurriculars that give back to my community. So I don't think there needs to be distinctively that line of, okay, I'm doing this for myself up until this point, and then I'll start working on my community.
So that's why you joined What You Love?
Yes, no. Well, no. When I heard about this nonprofit, this is something I wanted to do. I didn't really need that like resume booster. But especially in high school, I was like, okay, I have this day free. Is there a club that I could fit in there? And so I would join something called Key Club. Not everyone knows about it, but it's more of a volunteer-based club that focuses on helping your own community.
Yes.
So I would do that. Or, okay, after school hours and club hours run by the school, I still have Mondays and Wednesdays free. So what can I fill that with? And then I found in my county, there is a youth court program, which was taking actual youths that committed nonviolent and non-sexual misdemeanors and putting them through a rehabilitation program where not only did we help them try to avoid the law in the future by focusing on more less severe punishments and more rehabilitative steps to integrate back to society, but it would also give us an avenue to learn about the legal system. And we would actually like act as a judge in a real life case.
That's incredible. Yes.
So like, again, helping my community and helping this particular population within my community, but also again, like
to learn.
Giving me something to do.
Yes, fulfilling. It felt fulfilling.
So long story short, like I feel like to answer your question, it doesn't really necessarily have to be split. Like I feel like there can be that combination, and if you're looking to do something, seeking out a means in which you can help yourself and the community.
Oh yes, that's really beautiful.
That's well said. That's very well said. And I think a lot of that kind of comes with, look, let's face it, Alexa, not everybody has as clear of a head on their shoulders as you do, and particularly at a young age. I know I didn't. I mean, again, not that I'm like some older than you, but yeah, no, it's a process, and you know, altruism doesn't come naturally to everybody, baby. No, but I think you're right. I think you're right in that if you honor yourself and if you know you do good by yourself, you'll eventually by extension do good by your community.
Absolutely. So we have like 15 minutes left, and we have our friend, we all know her, she's amazing, she's here watching us, Console, and she had a question for you. And so we'll bring her on, but we'll be talking more about community here. And if there are any more thoughts you have, please share them with us. I also really thank you so much for taking your time. I know you're tired, you were in classes all day. And here's Consuelo.
Hi. Hi, Alexa, nice to meet you.
So you were watching, something came up in your mind as you were watching us, Console, all the conversation, all the things we talked about.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I really enjoy your conversation, and Alexa is really incredible. You're amazing. So, of course, I've heard great things about you, but you're amazing hearing your how you were talking. So I could see the next leader. Have you thought about running in the future? That's my first question.
I'm so sorry. It cut out a little bit. Can you repeat the question?
Oh,
I said I can see while I was listening to your thoughts, your the person you are. I thought about your, I can see a leader in you. So have you thought about running for office in the future?
Oh. I actually have thought about it.
Yeah.
It's something that I've recently started to think about a lot more, because, like, going back when I said that I thought about being a lawyer, I then moved into more, okay, I'm going to do law for a little bit, but I eventually want to go in as a politician. And then I kind of took a step back from that and thought about, okay, let me focus more on small businesses and nonprofits and maybe go into that area. However, very recently I've come back to maybe being a politician, but I'm again trying to weigh the pros and cons of that, just because it's like, as we all see, it's very polarizing, and they're very sneaky and, like, very manipulative. So it's very hard to make change through our current government, which I would love to say, okay, let me get in there and try to make that change. But I could also say that I can make more direct change by going back and focusing on nonprofits and working in that avenue. So that's something that I'm trying to weigh. But I have thought about going into, like, specifically running in the future.
So Consulate is a New Yorker. So in case you choose to be in politics, you have.
You have my support. So I'll be behind you.
Yeah. Consulate knows all of the politicians. She has.
She got your back.
I got your back. So another thing I was thinking about, even though we see polarization and how, especially older generation, how they they're almost running everything. Even though younger generation is trying the best they could, older generation are the ones who are running, everything, but we are in different era. Somehow you could see the generational conflict. And we are in the era they don't understand, mostly because they grew up in a different era. So we are in a technology era. So mostly young people are more connected than compared to how they were connected. They were not connected because there was not technology before. But now you know what's going on in Iran. So you know what's going on in Afghanistan. You know what, like, you are more connected than you are more open. You understand the world compared to how they understand the world. So, but somehow, so when you see this generational conflict, do you have hope? Do you feel like there's a way to find a way to kind of like make this older generation listen? Do you feel like do you get sometimes disappointed and lose hope, especially when you see the way they run things and they don't understand how you operate, you think, because of the different era we live now. So sometimes that is sometimes that disappoint you and make you feel maybe we should
be running.
I definitely do see that generational gap, but I also, like, sadly think that there are some parties that use that to their advantage. Like, I'm not trying to say that I'm against Democrats or for Democrats, because that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm not trying to talk about my political affiliation. But what I will say is that I'm not a fan of really any congressman, rather Democrat or Republican, just because, like, for example, when it came to Democrats, especially with codifying Roe v. Wade,
Yeah.
A lot of congressmen with that affiliation kind of dangled that carrot and said, okay, if you vote for me, I'll codify Roe v. Wade. And 60 years later, nothing happened because they want to use that as a means to get votes. Because they know a lot of people in younger generations want that to happen. But now, since everything that happened with overturning Roe v. Wade, people are starting to see that that was only a means of getting reelected rather than an actual piece that was on their agenda.
Right.
So I think now a lot of Democrats are scrambling to codify that, so because they were kind of called out for doing those types of things. So I think that's like that's one way that I do kind of lose hope with the generational gap. Because obviously when it comes to Congress, they're just looking for votes and a job. So because the job security is kind of, I don't know, it goes back and forth there. So that's one way where I see it really negatively affecting us, because they're trying to make it seem like they do actually hear what the younger generation wants, but in reality, it's not something they're really focused on, because if they were focused on it, it would have been more pushed.
Yes.
So that's one way where I kind of lose hope. But like, what I really do think that will kind of bridge that gap is really less attacking related conversations and more of just very respectful conversation.
Yes.
Where just because, like, especially recently, people, especially the younger generations, are getting angry with older generations, so it's very much attack based, where like remember that phrase, like, okay boomer, like, was very much used in a negative way. I just, in me personally, I don't see that as an effective way to communicate to older generations, because they're just going to see it as an attack.
Yes.
And hence they're not going to take anything that we say seriously.
Absolutely.
So I think just very, very neutral based conversations, and just kind of like just talking through your feelings rather than attacking the other person's opinion. I feel like a lot, because I have noticed a lot of people say, like, oh, I can't get this person to like see what I'm trying to say when it comes to, example, gun laws. And then I'll be like, okay, well, how did you approach it? Like, was it very much like you trying to say your opinion and not accepting anything else? And they would kind of agree that that's how it went. And I'm like, okay, like, while I don't think that, or while I don't disagree with you, maybe that's not the best way to approach it.
Yes, finding a common ground and to having more of a constructive conversation. Conversations are going to erupt, and then leave it at the table without having any solutions. Because when, as you just mentioned, when we just keep bumping heads, all we're gonna do is not listen to one another, because we're all right in our own minds. And so if I'm at the table and trying to convince me, not listening to me, then we leave without having any solutions. So I think your way is really good. I like the way you see life, because we need those conversations. We need those having generations who are, somebody who's 70 having a conversation with someone who's 20, and they're both listening to one another, because this world is yours too. And so I really like that. And I love the question, Cosplay. You can also run.
No, I can be what they call the people who help others for the campaign. I can be a campaign stuff.
A campaign
No,
manager.
Oh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed everything you were talking about. You're amazing.
I know.
No, you are amazing.
Also, she's a mutual love team.
Yes,
so.
she's on our
team.
And our consulate
very,
too.
yeah, we're very lucky to be
Yes.
able to work with both of you, like
on a daily
weekly basis.
daily
Yeah,
basis. Yeah.
Very, very special, very special person.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But I did want to sort of leave it off with this, and Constantly, you may have touched on it a little bit, but I have my question written down here. It is, what positive change do you hope to be a part of for yourself, and by extension, what positive message do you have for the older generation, the people a little bit younger than them, and your generation, the people who are inheriting this world in the future? What sort of messages do you have?
Well, going off of your first question on positive change, I'm very much getting more into environmental regulation and sustainability, just because I do see that as one of the most crucial things we can focus on right now, because in order to keep fixing all these other social challenges that we face in society, we need to have, a planet to live on that's healthy and can sustain every species on the planet. So that's one thing that I think is very important to focus on, so that we can keep improving as a society. But I guess I'm trying to think as a advice. I really it's really cliche, but be open-minded.
Yeah.
Understand that we don't live in a world of absolutes and extremes, and that a compromise can be found between two people coming from different backgrounds. But I think that's really important, because that's when change can happen, is when we're not butting heads and rather finding a common solution to fix both of our issues.
Oh yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also, one of our community members, Grace, she said also
when somebody tells her to be vegan, she leaves.
Also, Grace, make sure to be vegan. No, but that's. But what you said it's cliche. There's a lot of things are cliche for a reason, though.
Yes.
Right. I mean, there is a reason why. Why many people say these things.
Yeah.
So, I agree. I think we all agree with you. And beautiful sentiments as always.
Yeah.
And again, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I know
it was a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah.
Very nice meeting you.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
And for everybody in our community, thank you for tuning in. I did see a couple comments.
Yes.
A lot of them are in Europe and some in Asia, Australia.
Yeah,
a lot of them aren't awake right now, so maybe just when they do wake up. But yeah, hopefully they'll resonate, or what you say will resonate with them and inspire people as well to take positive change. To be open-minded, as you say.
To be open-minded.
Yeah.